UDOT is about to open another traffic study, and the public comment period is open between now and the middle of December. The subject of this study is State Route 190, otherwise known as Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. This is a follow-up to their much publicized study that was just completed about SR 210, otherwise known as Little Cottonwood Canyon Road. Both of these roads extend up the Cottonwood Canyons, which are beautiful canyons on the southeast side of Salt Lake County. They're about 10 miles long, and you can kind of see the mountains behind me there, and the clouds and the snowstorms. These canyons are very popular places for recreation. There's cycling on the roads, mountain biking on trails, there's hiking, there's rock climbing, but let's be honest, the main draw is skiing. There are two big resorts at the ends of both canyons, and both are huge attractors of many people in cars headed up to these resorts. And if you're going skiing to one of these two resorts, you can just count on there being traffic jams. That's just part of the experience. And these traffic jams are limiting the number of people who go up to these resorts, and they're limiting the amount of business that these ski resorts can handle. Prompted by business concerns, by community support for solutions, and of course the state legislature wanting something to be done for publicity in the state, UDOT engaged in first the Little Cottonwood Canyon study, and now is beginning the Big Cottonwood Canyon study as a way of getting people up to these ski resorts in the wintertime. This is an interesting problem for UDOT, because the general solution that they've gone with in the past of just make the roads wider, ease congestion by forcing more congestion through a certain corridor, widening it out, that's not going to work here in the Cottonwood Canyons. Everyone can agree that this isn't some place like downtown Salt Lake City where you can just demolish buildings and add more freeway lanes. No. This is a natural habitat. This is a beautiful canyon, a recreation space, and widening the road beyond maybe one auxiliary lane is out of the question. And so for the first time, UDOT's really going to have to grapple with the question of how to get people, not just cars, but people up to the ski resorts, or up from one place to another. And at the beginning of this process, many urbanists were very excited. What's the way to get people out of their cars into a large space, into a concentrated, dense area? The answer is usually trains. There has been multiple proposals for special trains to go up the canyons. In fact, Little Cottonwood Canyon used to have its own railway anyway, to get up to the mines at the head of the canyon there, where the ski resorts are now. That railroad right-of-way has since been built over many times, both by highways, by private properties, and in most sections by a trail near the creek. A very popular trail, I might add. And so any new railways going up that canyon would be built just parallel with the existing existing highway there. The trouble is the canyons are very steep. In some cases, some sections go up to 10% grade, which is a lot more than a train can really handle, especially if you're going to talk about snow and ice and winter conditions. And so the only way to get a train up these canyons is through a rack railway system. That's where you have basically a gear that's attached to the axle of the wheels, and then that engages with a spread out long rail with teeth in it, a rack that's placed in the center. And that way the weight of the train is handled by the wheels, but the position on the track, forward and backwards, is handled entirely by this gear system. You can have very, very steep grades handled by rack railways. They can go up steeper grades than cars ever could. The only issue with this is that it's more expensive. Well, there's many issues, and more expensive is one, more complicated operations is another, but the biggest problem is that they are slow. Most rack railways operate at about 15 miles per hour, and the fastest ones get up to maybe 25 miles per hour. So if we're talking about a rack railway up the 10 miles of the canyon, you're looking at least a half an hour trip. Cars able to do this in about 15 minutes if there's no traffic. And that creates a problem all on its own, of having a solution to a traffic problem being twice as long of a trip as the actual car trip itself. People really don't like that sort of thing, where they feel like the compromise solution is a lot worse, that they're being forced into something that's less of a good experience for them. If we're building something new, it should be bigger and better and faster than ever before. And the rack railway is not that. There's other issues as well. There's the avalanche corridors where you need to build big sheds, big concrete roofs over the road, and the tracks, single track that would go next to the road, in order to make sure that the avalanches that sometimes close the canyon these days, to make sure that they don't close the railroad that would go up there as well. And then, of course, with only one track, you can only have a certain frequency of trains. You have the huge peaks of going back and forth at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, but not a lot in between. It just becomes operationally complicated. I don't think there's anything prohibitively wrong about building a train. I would be happy to support one, but it's not one I'm going to really, it's not a fight I'm eager to have. So early in the process of the Little Cottonwood Canyon study, UDOT stopped considering that cog railway as a main option. That left them with two other options to consider. The more famous one is the gondola system, a ropeway, basically a way to get people, little cabins up on a moving ropeway. Maybe there's several cables. There's many different options to go with. There are multiple cable systems that could be used as examples, but none of them are quite as long as the 10 miles up from the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon up to the ski resorts. This one would be the longest in the world. This was an option that was promoted heavily by the ski owners specifically. It's very popular at the ski resorts. They have multiple lifts on their own. They know how to handle these things. It was not so popular among most of the general public. A lot of it was aesthetic, because the ropeway is going to have to be built using tall towers, some up to 200 feet tall. Now the canyon's taller than that, but 200-foot tall towers in multiple places just dotting up and down the canyon is going to change the visual environment, I think that's the phrase they put, for the canyon. And there'd be other problems as well. If the canyon is too windy, the gondola wouldn't be able to work. It's even slower than the cog train, so it would take about 40-45 minutes to get to the top. There's no intermediary stops, not like the train or the road, which could stop anywhere for different trailheads during the summer. The gondola would only run during the winter time, and it would only take people to the ski resorts, because that's who's promoting this gondola idea. Anyway, the gondola became kind of a meme on its own, and UDOT was forced to choose between this gondola, which was promoted by the ski resort owners, or an enhanced bus system. Enhanced bus system would be more just like the ski buses that already go up the canyon, except that there would be more buses, there would be better shelters, there would be better stations at the what they call mobility hubs, which are large areas at the bottom of the canyon where people could park their cars in a parking garage and then take the bus. The buses would, under this idea, be free for people to use, and there would instead be a toll on the road, so that private vehicles that want to go up the canyon during the ski season or during busy times at all would need to pay, and the toll revenue that would be generated at these toll booths would go and pay for the bus system. So it would be a completely closed system economically. Now, people have a visceral reaction to tolls. I too am a cheapskate. I don't like paying for extra things that used to be free. But there's a reason that engineers and economists and planners really love tolls on roads. It's because you finally put a cost on something and can finally see the value of it. The reason that freeways are congested isn't because there's too many cars. The reason freeways are congested is because they're free. That's really the main problem of it. If you had to actually pay for the stuff that you're using, then the system would have a proper feedback loop, and you'd be able to use the revenue generated to increase capacity or to help push people into modes where you wouldn't need such expensive solutions as freeway expansion. Anyway, in an effort to get Utahns used to the idea of paying for the things that they use, the bus system would come in phases. There'd be smaller tolls at first. It would be phased in slowly, and one of the benefits of this idea is that you could slowly ease into a full system. Give buses priority. You don't need to have a full lane yet, but that is one of the ideas to use in the future, to have a center lane that's bidirectional. Buses would go up the canyon in the morning and down in the evening on this exclusive lane. In the summertime, they could use it to get around cyclists. In the wintertime, to get around cars. But that lane would be expensive, and the only way to pay for it would be through tolls. But the fun thing is, you wouldn't need it yet. Unlike the gondola and unlike the railway, which need to be built out as full systems from day one, with the bus system, you wouldn't need to have new infrastructure right away. You could slowly start with a minimal toll just to get the operations of the buses going. Then you could raise tolls over time as ridership grows and as the infrastructure needs of the buses increases. And it seemed like a really good idea. So when it came to time for UDOT to decide which one to choose, we were all waiting to see what they would say about why they chose the bus system. And the answer came out of what they chose, and honestly, I've admired UDOT for this approach ever since. It's pretty genius. They chose the gondola, but they chose the gondola in a phased approach. As in, the very first step they will take is implementing an enhanced bus system, and then they will make improvements to the bus system as needed, and the gondola is the backup solution for when the buses become too crowded. And that's funny to all of us who've really read the proposal, because the buses have a higher capacity than the gondola system ever would. It's going to have a faster travel time as well. And so it's a way to basically appease the people who wanted to have a gondola system, say that you were right, they're selected, but it's also to say that we're going to build that later when we have the funds, when we have the need for it, and they're pretty certain that there's never really going to be the need for it. And it's telling already that when UDOT started this new study about Big Cottonwood Canyon, or the one that's starting right now, they didn't even really pitch that many alternative ideas. Their main proposal now is already starting with enhanced bus service. And one of the reasons could be is that there are technical challenges with railways and gondolas in Big Cottonwood Canyon. It's a rougher environment. The road has some switchback sections. It's narrower at the mouth. There's just not a lot of wiggle room to work with there. But a lot of it is just that I think they wanted to avoid the publicity, the media circus they got with the last one in the gondola. It's also interesting that they would choose to do both canyons with separate studies instead of having one study for both canyons. The problem that you're still going to face with the enhanced bus option for Little Cottonwood Canyon, whenever they get around to it, is that you still have to have a place for people to get from their cars into the buses. Little Cottonwood Canyon isn't close to a freeway. It isn't close to any transit lines. People are going to have to drive there. There's no way around it. So you're going to have a place for people to park these cars, thousands of cars. All this area that is extremely pricey because it's where people want to build hotels and condos and all these things to service the ski resort and the ski people up there. UDOT's going to have to buy a big chunk of that and pave it over for parking, build a big parking garage in sensitive, earthquake-prone areas. If you're talking about Big Cottonwood Canyon, the same idea applies. You're going to have to build a parking, what they call mobility hub. It is just a big parking lot. But the location is different, and that makes a huge difference to my opinion on the whole thing. The mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon is right next to a quarry. This quarry site is large, it's flat, it's big enough for a lot of parking area, it's large enough for mixed-use development, it's large enough for a visitor center if you want to build one of those, it's big enough for a transit center. And that's crucial too, because on the other side of the quarry is Interstate 15. Interstate 15 is a major freeway. It's the three-quarter belt route around Salt Lake City, and it connects to all parts of the valley. So people who are driving their cars can go straight from the freeway into the quarry sites, the mobility hub there. But there are also more transits that connects close to the nearby, and if you're connected to a freeway, you can also have a better transit connection too. To show you what I mean, let's break our format and go to a map.
In this view, we can see both Cottonwood Canyons, with Big Cottonwood in the north and Little Cottonwood in the south. If both of the traffic improvement projects were to continue separately, we would arrive at something like this, with 2 independent bus lines and 2 mobility hubs. This isn't bad, per se, but it could be greatly improved by combining the 2 mobility hubs into one central location. This will augment the connectivity of the single mobility hub, and it will also alleviate traffic on Wasatch Boulevard, a two-lane road that connects I-215 and Little Cottonwood Canyon, and is already a source of traffic delays during the ski season. With concentrated traffic demand, the single mobility hub can justify better connections, both to I-15 and also to transit. It isn't unrealistic to think that there could be commuter lanes or preferential exits arranged directly into the mobility hub, similar to how the Southtown Mall in Sandy has a special exit directly from I-15. Doing this would redirect traffic from an already congested Spooey interchange at 6200 South, which would be a great relief to the locals. A transit connection could take many forms, but a good initial offering would be a direct bus shuttle between the mobility hub and Murray Central Station, a hub of commuter rail, light rail, and local buses into downtown and across the Wasatch Front. This 8-mile shuttle would be shorter than some of UTA's regular bus bridges, and would consolidate the ski buses that currently leave from 2 different Blue Line stations. If such a shuttle became popular, the service may even become direct, with buses stopping at the mobility hub but then continuing on into the canyons in 2 long routes. Doing so would create a 2-seat ride from downtown or the airport straight to the ski slopes, which would be a major selling point for Salt Lake City.
So that's some of the possibilities and solutions if you consider the problem of the 2 Cottonwood Canyons as a single problem. Unfortunately, as we've seen, UDOT has chosen to approach the problem as 2 separate problems that need 2 separate solutions. And this is indicative of the entire planning process that we follow, not just in Utah, but in the United States. We have a very reactionary problem that deals with small problems one at a time. It doesn't really ever take the next step to find bigger problems that are the underlying sources of the little problems. It treats symptoms rather than the actual cause of a disease. If the freeway is congested, that's just because, it needs one more lane at a time. That's a small solution, and it starts out as a small solution, just one lane, but if you keep going back to the small solution, over time, a bunch of small solutions become a big solution, or rather, a big problem. And that's how you end up with situations with, say, a 14-lane freeway being proposed in downtown Salt Lake City right now in the 2020s. And this should sound familiar to a lot of people who have heard my walk and talks before. The Rio Grande Plan is a big solution to an even bigger set of problems. Each on their own, each problem may not be big enough to justify something large like the Rio Grande Plan. Perhaps if you're treating just the Central Station problem of building a train station for Salt Lake City, well, UTA has a pretty good idea of what they need. A nice lobby, restrooms, facilities for people, but it doesn't address the bigger problem of the Central Station being in a non-central location. You could talk about railroad crossings downtown and how they block traffic, and maybe you could build individual grade separations cheaper than the whole train box of the Rio Grande Plan, but maybe not. And that doesn't solve the bigger issue of keeping our streets as places in downtown rather than just passages to get past an obstacle like railroad tracks. You could talk about the East-West Divide. Salt Lake City is addressing the East-West Divide right now through an arts program of putting art on the bridges. Maybe that solves the East-West Divide, maybe it doesn't, but the art is a heck of a lot cheaper than what we've pitched with the Rio Grande Plan. So you can see that the Rio Grande Plan relies on holistic planning approach, something that sees the bigger problem that is underlying a bunch of little problems. And that's why it's been such an uphill battle for us to get the Rio Grande Plan pitched or put in to the long-term planning for the Wasatch Front Regional Council, for Salt Lake City, at the state legislative levels, and at so many different other places. I do strongly believe it is the right solution for our city and for our state. And we shouldn't be discouraged that our planning process is kind of blind to these larger projects. In the United States, we can build big projects. They're not going to happen automatically. The only way that they happen is if the citizens rise up, communicate their needs to their leaders, and stay with it until the project is done. If you want to help with this process of speaking up, of guiding our leaders through the process of building the Rio Grande Plan, then why don't you check out our Linktree? Become involved in our volunteer group via Rio Grande. If you don't want to be involved, why not write your elected representative? If you have already, thank you so much. I can't describe to you how much good that is doing. It really does make a difference of having those letters given to your representative and have that issue brought to their attention again and again. If you've written one of these letters, why not write again? It does more good the second time, and then the third, and then the fourth. If you're looking for news, keep up with us on our social media. I can tell you that there are big things in the works that I'd love to be able to talk to you about, but we'll have to wait for the next walk and talk in the future. I'm Christian Linhart. Thank you for watching.